Anger is a terrible character trait. It's extraordinarily dangerous. The sages have said about anger that it's just like idolatry, and it's something that we must avoid at all costs. Good morning. Welcome to our Aliyah this morning. We're going to be talking about the death of Miriam, the issues that surrounded that, and Moses being banned and barred from going into the promised land, and how that has to do with the issue of anger in our lives and why it's so dangerous. So we'll be looking at some insights. Let's jump right into that, because this is something that all of us probably, I would imagine, the vast majority of people have to work on, is this midah, this trait of anger. By the way, glad you're here. Please subscribe if you're just now joining us on this channel and you want to be staying in tune with everything we're teaching here as we're looking at the Torah of Moshe and the light of Messiah Yeshua and trying to apply these things into our lives. So anger, a lot of people deal with anger for various reasons. Even people that are passive aggressive ultimately struggle with anger. And then, of course, there are people who, on the other extreme, have anger problems. They just tend to just get angry, just fly into a rage and those types of things. And the sages have said about anger that anger is when somebody gets angry, they actually enter into idolatry. It seems kind of harsh to say that if you think about it, but let's understand the mindset, because the rationale behind that statement actually is extraordinarily logical. Somebody who gets angry is operating in idolatry. Why? Because somebody who's angry means that they are the center of their universe. They feel slighted. They feel that they have been disrespected. They feel that somebody has offended them or what have you. And so they themselves are expressing that they deserve honor, they deserve better, what have you. And therefore, it all becomes about self. Is there such thing as righteous anger? Yes, there is. But even then, we have to be careful, just like we're going to find in our statement. This is why the sages have said that we must avoid anger. Sometimes we as human beings like to say things like, well, there's righteous anger, there's appropriate times to be angry, and all that's true, and we could parse through those and what have you. But this is why the sages generally make blanket statements and say, it's better just to avoid it altogether. And isn't that true? Can you walk through a minefield? Yes, you can. There's training to do so, believe it or not. There's training to traverse a minefield for infantry personnel who are experienced. You can do that. Is it better to go around? Yes, it is. Because even though you have been trained to walk through that minefield, it doesn't mean that you won't accidentally trip a mine. So the only way you can guarantee that you will not trip that mine is if you go around. And so sometimes when we are trying to get righteous anger, righteous indignations, we cross the line. And the only way to guarantee not to do that is try to avoid anger altogether. So what you and I need to do, and this is this is not an easy task, I will tell you, especially in our day and age. But what you and I need to do is practice remaining calm. On that note, the Rabbi and I I'm trying to think how many years ago this was. It doesn't really matter, I guess, how many years ago it was, but it was 10, 11 years ago. We had the opportunity to go through some training at a headquarters of a fire department over in another part of town, because they were asking for volunteers who would be willing in times of war, civilians who would be willing in times of war to go to Israel and be a part of helping, basically. And essentially it had to do with firefighting and triage and rescue and that type of thing. So they were asking for civilians who wanted to go through a particular training and do that. So we went there, and it was fascinating. I've never been through firefighting training. I never had that opportunity to do that specifically. So we got to do what some firefighters do and go into a smoke-filled building, a fire building with hoses. And then can you imagine the Rebbe and the rabbi doing that? That's pretty interesting, actually. But we had a lot of fun. But we also learned some interesting things. And when it came time to go through a particular part of training that had to do with rescuing someone from a mangled car or a building that's collapsed on them, and you're trying to get to them, a lot of people, the firefighters that were teaching us and training us there, were saying that the human nature is that when you are involved in that situation, you want to go fast. You want to go really fast because naturally you're trying to help somebody, frankly, before their life expires. So you want to do some things quickly and erratically and just hurry. And something they said to me has over a decade ago stuck with me, and that is that basically remaining calm is fast. Okay, being of clear mind, doing things methodically. There was a phrase I used, and it was I say cute, I don't mean cute, but it was a clever phrase, and I just it escapes me at the moment. It was just a little frustrating, but there was a thing that they said to help you remember this. But basically, the phrase was saying that when we do things calmly and we do things methodically, that's when we do things quickly. And when we do things with rush and we're just hurry and our mind scatters, then that's when we do things slowly, even though it appears we're going fast, because we're messing everything up. And so the point of that is that you and I need to practice remaining calm, even in difficult situations, keeping our wits about us, even in difficult situations in which we are tempted to become angry, because, ladies and gentlemen, it doesn't ever help. And now, that's a tall order. It's a tall order. I know. I'm sitting here telling you that this is what we need to do, realizing that it's a very, very much a challenge, but it's worth it if we can really work on remaining calm and keeping our wits about us as opposed to getting angry. So let's look at what Rambam has to say about this incident. And we're going to look at anger here, and then we're going to go back and look at the context and try to figure out why this is even a topic. How is this even, or why is this a topic with respect to our Torah portion this week? And it has to do, by the way, with the death of Miriam, who is the sister of Moses, and the people are not being very sweet, okay? And so Moses gets angry, and this is what it says. It says, the Rambam explains that Moses was punished. The reason he could not get into the promised land ultimately was because he lost his temper. Now, I want to say, you and I will look at this situation here in just a minute, and you and I would say, well, I'd be mad too. And that's true. And the issue is that the higher you go up in leadership, seemingly minor infractions become big infractions. And leaders tend to pay a heavier price for something that someone who's not a leader may not have paid a price at all, or very, very small price. In the case of Moses, you're talking about, Moses. So when he commits an infraction, it may be a minor misdemeanor to you and I, but in this case, it was a first-degree felony. So it says here that Moses was punished for anger with which he chastised Bnei Israel, and he used a harsh words, and when he said to them, listen now, you rebels. Now, understand something, that in our modern age, that doesn't sound much like a curse. But in fact, a rebel is somebody who is openly, willingly, eyes wide open, sinning against Hashem on purpose because he wants to or she wants to anger God. That is a rebel. And by the way, there is salvation, as it says in our Siddur, even for rebels. But that's a terrible curse. This is Moses saying to the people, listen now, you rebels, you people who are purposely and intentionally trying to blaspheme and confront God. Now, Rabbi Asher Wise says regarding this, anger is a terrible trait. Now, let's just pause there for a moment, because I have said before that, because I've seen it, I've heard it. There are people out there that actually are basically proud of their anger. They're proud that they have a short temper. They're proud that they can fly off the handle. If you listen to people talk, sometimes you'll see that you know, they're a little, they kind of are a little proud of their ability to get really angry. And some people say, well, I'm Irish, therefore I'm angry. I've heard people say, well, I'm a Latino or a Latina, and we're fiery, and that type of thing. I mean, this is very common. But ladies and gentlemen, the reality is that anger is a terrible trait. If you're somebody who's short-tempered, if you're somebody who is just fiery, that's not good. And if that's you, then I'm going to suggest that that's something you really need to work on, and that is remaining calm and refraining from getting angry. Don't raise your hand, but anybody been around somebody like that? Has anybody been around somebody who is short-tempered, who flies off the handle? And anybody been around such a person? Is when they fly off the handle, when they absolutely lose their composure, when you look at that, do you go, wow, what a great person? I wish that one day I could be like that. Anybody feel that way? Don't raise your hand. The reality is, ladies and gentlemen, there's certain things in life that are just facts. And one of those facts is that whenever we lose our composure, it never, ever looks good. I don't care if the situation in which we're losing our composure is understandable. I was watching a video one time and on YouTube and it, how YouTube is sometimes, little videos pop up and you're like, oh, that's an interesting, and you click on it. It was an A&E clip and it had to do with a father and mother who were in court, and somebody had, murdered their child, unfortunately, and that they were giving a victim's impact statement. And at some point, the man who had been convicted made some type of facial gesture that the father interpreted to be disrespectful, and basically he lunged at the man, and of course the deputies had to get involved and restrain him and these kinds of things. Now, many people who saw that video and looked at that video completely understood the anger in that situation. Absolutely, you better believe. And yet the father lost his composure, and it ultimately made him look unhinged. Now, granted, everybody understood, and the judge understood, and the bailiffs understood. They still treated that father with a level of dignity given the circumstances, but you understand the point. That was an extreme example, ladies and gentlemen. That's a very extreme example, because obviously, thank God, very, very few of us have ever been in that situation where anger was so warranted. My point is simply this, that no matter what, whenever we become unhinged and we lose our composure, it never looks good. Now imagine if we're doing that over stupid things. We're getting so angry over something dumb, and we're losing our composure over things that don't matter. They don't have to do with children who were murdered, unfortunately. God forbid. You understand? So this is where we have to really, really take hold of ourselves and understand that's not a good trait. Anger is a terrible trait. And when we get angry, we need to make teshuvah. We need to say, you know what? I'm not going to get angry. I'm just going to refrain because it's not good. It says here, anger is a terrible trait. This is Rabbi Weiss again, from which a person must distance himself to the opposite extreme. This is one of those things, ladies and gentlemen, where we need to go to the opposite extreme. This is how bad anger is. It's idolatry is what it is. So it says, man must train himself never to become angry, even in situations that justify anger. Again, this is not easy, but the things in life that matter most are rarely easy. It says, if a person finds it necessary to intimidate his family, or if a community leader finds it necessary to intimidate the community to guide them towards a self-improvement, he may only give the appearance of anger that is necessary to rebuke them, while his thoughts remain calm, like a person who feigns anger but is not really angry at all. You see? So anger is a very, very bad trait, something that we have to really understand. Now, let's look at the root of here, what's going on in the Torah. Let's go back to the Torah portion and find out what's happening here. This is coming from Numbers chapter 20, and it has to do with the death of Miriam, who is the sister of Moses and Aaron. So it says here, the entire congregation of the Israelites destined to enter the land of Israel arrived at the desert of Zin on the 1st of Nisan in the first month in the year 2487. Now, this narrative is picking up after the 40 years in the wilderness. Everybody is dead who was supposed to die in the wilderness. They're dead. And we're getting ready to enter the Holy Land. But Aaron and Miriam are not going to enter Aaron and Miriam are not going to enter the Holy Land. Or Miriam is anyway. She's about to pass away. So it says here, and the people stayed in Kadesh, and Miriam died there in the tranquil manner that will be described later. Now, this has to do with the kiss of God. There are certain righteous people who passed away as a result of the kiss of God. Anyway, and she was buried there. Now that Miriam had died, now this is where we get into a conflict. Now that Miriam had died, the well that had accompanied the people on their journeys in her merit disappeared. Now, there's the well of Miriam, okay? The well of Miriam, ladies and gentlemen, was literally a rock. It was the rock. And this rock, the original rock that Moses struck and water gushed out. Now, understand the water that came from this rock, the insights bring down from the Midrash Rabbi, from Legends of the Jews, from the book of Yashar. They all agree that the water was a lot. It was streams in the desert. It was, in fact, there's one insight that says that the rivers flowed out of this rock. Rivers of living water flowed out of this rock. And there was a river between each tribe. And as a result, the tribes had to use boats to cross these rivers to get from one side to the other, to get from one tribe to the other. And this rock, whenever he struck it, this water flowed out, but it was that rock that followed us around the wilderness. Yes, the original Rolling Stone. It followed us around the wilderness. There's a lot that is talked about in literature about this rock. And whenever the Israelites would pause to camp somewhere, this rock would come and position itself at the front of the tent of meeting. The sages, or the elders rather, would gather around it, and they would sing a song, "Spring up, O well," and that rock would burst forth its streams of living waters. And so you can imagine, if you look at the camp of the Israelites, the tabernacle is in the middle, so the rock would be in the middle, and then the water would go out from that rock. And even the Apostle Paul, again, nothing new in the New Testament, he writes in his letter to the Corinthians that he writes about this rock that follows around the wilderness, and this rock is the Messiah Yeshua. Now, when Paul said that, that is one of the many places in which he absolutely affirms the oral Torah as valid and true, if we want to use him as a witness, right? So he, at least Paul, there's lots of Christians, lots of Messianic Christians, there's lots of Hebrew roots Christians who don't believe in the oral Torah, but they believe Paul, which is a little ironic since Paul believes in the oral Torah. So this is you can imagine, this is where can you just, first of all, I said can you imagine, but can you imagine actually being in the wilderness, and there's this rock that is following us everywhere, and from this rock flows out rivers of living water. Now, this rock was there in the merit of Miriam. Miriam, ladies and gentlemen, is not just the sister of Moses and Aaron, but she's also a prophetess. In fact, understand, she's credited for the life of Moses himself. It was Miriam who talked her parents into joining back together. They had separated because they didn't want to have any children, because because of Pharaoh's decree, they did not want to have any children that would be thrown into the Nile. And it was Miriam who said, your decree is worse than Pharaoh's decree because you've separated from each other, but who's to say that you might have a girl? I might have a sister. The sister's not going to be thrown in the Nile, but since you've decided not to come together anymore, then you have killed not only the boy, but the girl. So they agreed, and they said, Miriam's right. We can't make that judgment. It's up to God to decide. So they joined together again, and her mother became pregnant, and her mother gave birth to a son named Moses. Had it not been for Miriam, there would be no Moses. So this is a very high-level prophetess. So the congregation had no water. All of them except the tribe of Levi. And all the tribes except for the tribe of Levi assembled against Moses and Aaron. The people argued with Moses and said, if only we had died by the plague, the way our brothers perished in Korach's rebellion when they sinned before God, for death by thirst is worse. Why have you brought the congregation of God to this desert so that we and our livestock should die here? Why have you taken us out of Egypt to bring us to this evil place? It's not a place that can be planted with seeds, or a place of fig trees and grapevines and pomegranates, and there's no water to drink. Moses and Aaron moved away from the assembly to the entrance of the tent of meeting and fell on their face and prayed to God that he would provide the people with water. The glory of God appeared to them and he said to Moses, take Aaron's staff from in front of the people, assemble the congregation, you and your brother Aaron, and speak in the presence of the rock, or speak in the presence to the rock, not a rock, the rock. Okay. Now, so far we're reading this narrative and we're like, okay, so Miriam dies, there's no more water, the people get upset. Moses and Aaron go to Hashem to find out can you please provide water again? We're not really sure what to do. So far, seems pretty calm, but what's missing in this narrative? What's missing in this narrative is any discussion of the people mourning for Miriam. Miriam, this great prophetess, in whose merit we have the water in the desert, which is amazing. No one, the narrative thus far has said nothing about the congregation mourning Miriam. All they care about is they don't have water. Very self-centered. It's all about, hey, we don't have water. What are we going to do with water? How come you took us out of Egypt? Take us back to Egypt. What's your problem, man? How come you lead us out here like this? Meanwhile, Miriam is laying there ready to be buried, and no one even cares. And this is eating on Moses. And so this is incredible. So Moses is told by God to speak to the rock, not a rock, the rock. And it says here that Moses and Aaron assembled the whole congregation in a small area in front of the rock, but the rock from which the water had flowed previously had rolled among the other rocks when it dried up, so Moses could not readily identify it. The people said to him, "What difference does it make from which rock you draw water for us?" And they just pointed to rocks at random and said, "Speak to that one," or what have you. And so this is not helping Moses's issue, because Moses is mad that these people are so self-centered and care so little about his precious sister that they're not even mourning her. And now God has said, speak to the rock. Now, this whole speak to any rock, there's a lot to be said about this with people who just want any Messiah. Okay. But that's for another time. And so Moses says, he gets angry at them. And he says, "Now listen, you foolish rebels. Are you telling Aaron and me what to do? Do you think we can draw water from you from just any rock other than the rock which God has commanded us to?" In other words, ladies and gentlemen, Moses got angry. He blew his stack. He lost his composure. When we read it in the text, it doesn't seem all that bad. It's just like, well, he just called them foolish rebels. But this is basically a curse. He curses at them, and he blows his stack. He loses his composure. And now, most of us who I've just said this narrative to, we could look at this and say, well, I would have too. And I'm going to tell you, I'm right there with you. But we have to think differently. We have to remain calm. Now, something else about Miriam, by the way, this goes back to what I was teaching yesterday about how human sacrifice, there's this paradox, right? On the one hand, Judaism abhors human sacrifice. And on the other hand, it's rather fundamental to the idea of atonement. As I said yesterday, all sacrifices are predicated, symbolic of the original sacrifice, which was Isaac on the mountain. And again, for us, we know that Yeshua came along and really fulfilled that particular sacrifice so that he's the final Akedah. To that point, it says Miriam died there. Rashi quotes a Talmud to explain why the death of Miriam is mentioned in the same Torah portion immediately after the parah aduma, or the red cow. And it says here, and this is also in the Chumash, by the way, it says it teaches us that just as a sacrifice serves to atone for the sins of the people, so does the death of a righteous person. Moed Katan 28a. At the loss of an illustrious person, the entire nation feels the pain, and this anguish brings them atonement. So we see here that part of Moses' anger is listen, not only are you you haven't mourned this great woman of God, this prophetess. You haven't mourned these people, okay? that are this woman rather who is great, but rather you are also speaking against someone from whose death has provided a level of atonement. There's a lot of going on here. We see that in the Jewish thought, and it's fundamental to Jewish thought, the death of the righteous, human sacrifice, brings atonement. Absolute. That's called a sacrifice. We even read in the Zohar, the Holy Zohar, that in the tabernacle in heaven, which is called by the tabernacle, it's called the tabernacle of Memtet, that Michael the archangel serves as the great high priest, and he offers upon the altar the souls of the righteous Jews for the atonement of Israel still on the earth. So we see this concept of human sacrifice, and this all is boiling up in Moses, and Moses gets angry. Instead of speaking to the rock, he strikes the rock. Now remember, the rock is Messiah. Why? But you say, well, wait a minute. He struck the rock the first time, so what's the problem? Well, he struck the rock the first time because God commanded him to. And that, ladies and gentlemen, I'm going to tell you right now is to give you a little bit of an insight. When the rock appeared the first time, it was struck, never to be struck again. Just like when Messiah Yeshua appeared to us the first time, we struck him. And when we struck him, it caused, as it were, rivers of salvation to flow out of him. But when he appears the second time, he is not to be struck, but he's coming to rule and reign. So Moses made a grave error. When he struck the rock the first time, that was at God's command, strike the rock, because from that salvation, water will flow out. But when the rock is revealed the second time, he says, speak to it, don't strike it, because the rock is Messiah. Now, when Moses struck the rock in anger, you can see the great damage that was caused, because that rock is Mashiach. And we're not going to strike Mashiach the second time he appears. So all of this brings us to one conclusion. We have to control our anger. And this is most important coming into the 3 weeks. We have to be really guarded against being angry. You know, it's a balance. In a way, we have to be passive. Now, I'm not a pacifist, when it comes to the need to defend oneself and those types of things. But even in that, and even there, you have to remain calm. So remember this, ladies and gentlemen, to remain calm. And if you're somebody who has a fiery temper and you tend to be somebody who flies off the handle, well, you're not alone. There's plenty of people like that. And you need to fix it. I would just encourage you not to make excuses for it, but fix it. And if you have flown off the handle, apologize to those that were involved in that situation, and just let them know that you're working on that and to pray for you about it. So thank you for being here today. Listen, write in the comments your takeaway. What is your takeaway today? What is something that you learned? Many people have been sharing their thoughts about these teachings in our comment section, and it's extraordinarily helpful. So let us know in the comments of this video what you learned today, what you've worked on, or if there's some interesting fact that jumped out at you that you can take home and say, that's my big takeaway. If you have not subscribed to our channel, please do so. And also, please don't forget to like this video. Let us know that you're here, you're listening, and you enjoy the teaching. Look forward to seeing you tomorrow with God's help as we continue our discussion of Parashah Chukat.